Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan. I'm so glad you're joining us today as we take a deep dive into a topic that's, well, it's something we all face, right? Trials and
No,
tribulations.
absolutely. It's a universal experience.
It is. And today we're going to be exploring it through the lens of Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 4.
A fantastic choice. Tirmidhi offers such profound insight.
He really does. And I think what's interesting is how Tirmidhi frames this discussion, starting with good character.
Yes. He lays the foundation with this idea that good character is essential. It's like the bedrock for navigating the challenges of life.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit.
Yeah.
Why is good character so central when facing trials? I mean, most of us understand that it's important, but Tirmidhi seems to be emphasizing it even more so when times get tough.
You're right. He really elevates its importance in the face of adversity. And I think Hadith 2002 really captures this. Nothing is heavier on the believer's scale on the day of judgment than good character.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
It is. It's saying that regardless of the trials we face, our character is what truly defines us in the eyes of Allah.
And what's interesting is that Tirmidhi doesn't just leave it at that. He goes deeper, giving specific examples of what constitutes good character, like honoring agreements, even when it's hard, giving sincere advice.
Even when it's not what someone wants to hear.
Right, exactly. He even talks about defending the honor of fellow Muslims, showing how good character extends beyond our personal actions to how we treat others, especially when they're vulnerable.
Exactly. It's not just about being a good person in a vacuum. It's about how that goodness manifests in our relationships and interactions, especially when those relationships are tested by external pressures. And one hadith that really stood out to me was Hadith 1925. It's where the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, compares giving sincere advice to establishing prayer and paying zakat.
Wow, that's a striking comparison. It really elevates the importance of sincere counsel in our spiritual well-being. It's like saying, yes, rituals are important, but how we treat each other is a huge part of the equation, too.
Exactly. It's about embodying our faith in our actions, not just our words. And you know what? That ties directly into navigating trials, because when our foundation is strong, when we've cultivated that good character, we're much better equipped to face challenges with grace and wisdom.
It's like having an inner compass that guides us,
Yeah.
especially when things get rough.
Yes. When we have that strong moral grounding, we're less likely to be swayed by pressure or make decisions that compromise our values.
Okay, so that brings us to another key concept Tirmidhi explores: trials as an inherent part of life. Not just random events, but tests of our faith woven into our existence.
Absolutely. And Hadith 2137 really stood out to me on this topic. It says, Allah has decreed a person's entire life, including their trials.
Yes, that's a powerful concept, isn't it? It can be daunting, but also comforting.
Daunting because it reminds us that hardship is inevitable, but comforting because it means we're not alone in our struggles. They're part of a larger plan, a divine design for our benefit, even if we can't always see it.
That perspective can definitely provide solace, especially when you're in the middle of something difficult. It's like knowing that even hardship has meaning and purpose, even if you don't fully understand it at the time.
Exactly. And this is where the qualities of patience and gratitude become so crucial.
Right. Hadith 507 emphasizes that responding to trials with these qualities elevates our standing with Allah.
And it's not about becoming passive or resigned to suffering, but choosing how we react, even when it's hard.
So it's not about suppressing our emotions, but channeling them productively and in a way that's spiritually enriching.
Yes, exactly. It's about recognizing that our response to trials is just as important as the trials themselves. It's a testament to our faith and, as we talked about earlier, our character. How we handle adversity reveals who we truly are at our core.
Now, we've been discussing trials in a general sense, but Tirmidhi doesn't shy away from specific types of trials, like those related to leadership and societal turmoil. He uses the term fitna, which can be incredibly challenging to navigate.
You're right. It's important to define fitna clearly for our listeners. It refers to those periods of intense trials and tribulations, often characterized by societal chaos, conflict, and confusion, where our faith and values are truly put to the test.
That's a really helpful clarification. And it's striking how relevant these ancient texts feel to what's happening today. Hadiths 2170 and 2202 warn about potential conflict amongst Muslims and the dangers of oppressive rulers. It's like those warnings are echoing in our world today.
They are cautionary tales reminding us of the fragility of peace and the potential for things to unravel even within our own communities. And it's especially relevant for us today. Tirmidhi's emphasis on individual responsibility in times of fitna.
Right. It's not about being a passive bystander. It's about recognizing we have a role to play, even if it seems small, in upholding justice and standing up for what's right.
Exactly. Hadiths 2259 and 2260 are so important here. They urge us to speak out against injustice and stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult or when others are going along with the wrong. It's a call to courage and moral integrity.
It's like these hadiths remind us that our individual choices matter, especially in times of collective turmoil. Our silence can be seen as complicity. Speaking up, even if it's just a whisper, can make a difference.
You're absolutely right, and that can be incredibly difficult, especially when facing pressure from those around us. Which brings us back to the importance of seeking refuge in Allah during times of hardship.
Yes, because ultimately our strength comes from our connection with the divine. Hadith 226 beautifully illustrates this, emphasizing the power of remembrance of Allah and turning to Him for support when feeling overwhelmed or lost.
And Hadith 2491 goes a step further, reminding us that everything, including guidance and provision, comes from Allah. So naturally, when facing a trial, turning to Him is the most powerful thing we can do. It's about acknowledging that even in our own strength, we're ultimately reliant on His grace and guidance.
It's like acknowledging we're not self-sufficient. Even when we strive and put in effort, those efforts are ultimately guided and supported by something greater than ourselves.
Beautifully put. That recognition, that humility, coupled with faith and Allah's support, is what enables us to navigate trials with resilience. Now, before we move on, there's one more point I want to touch on. Tirmidhi mentions how trials can serve as a purifier of sins.
Oh, yes. That's an interesting perspective. It's not that we should seek out suffering, but when faced with it, there can be the silver lining. Potential for spiritual growth and purification, even in our pain.
Exactly. Hadith 2396 tells the story of Prophet Ayub, peace be upon him, whose patience and faith during illness earned him Allah's favor and cleansed him of past transgressions. His suffering became a means of spiritual elevation, a testament to his trust in Allah's plan.
So it's not about glorifying suffering, but acknowledging that it can serve a higher purpose. It can refine us, purify us, and draw us closer to Allah.
Precisely. It's about shifting our perspective from why me to what can I learn from this? Not to downplay the pain, but to recognize that trials can be transformative, leading to spiritual growth and a deeper connection with the divine. And it's interesting how Tirmidhi connects this back to good character. It's like our character shines brightest in the face of adversity. When tested, our true nature is revealed.
Absolutely. Hadith 2507 emphasizes that responding to trials with patience and gratitude shows strong character. It's about maintaining composure, kindness, and integrity, even when things are falling apart.
You got it. Even when we're hurting, we choose to act in accordance with our values.
So it's like a test, revealing who we truly are. I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered the foundations of good character, trials as tests, and seeking refuge in Allah.
Yes, and I think we've laid a good foundation for delving into the more specific challenges Tirmidhi addresses. It's really fascinating how Tirmidhi uses these stories from the past, from the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and those early generations of Muslims, to help us understand these, timeless principles, right? He's not just telling stories, he's extracting lessons, providing guidance that's just as relevant today.
Right. It's like he had a glimpse into the future and saw what we're grappling with today. And it's not just the general idea of trials and tribulations, but the specific issues he highlights that really resonate, like leadership, conflict within the Muslim community.
And those dangers of oppressive rulers, too.
Yes, exactly. I mean, these are all things we see playing out in different ways around the world today.
One hadith that really stood out to me was Hadith 2229. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says, "I only fear for my ummah from the misguiding ummah." That's a pretty heavy statement.
It is, and it speaks to the huge responsibility that comes with leadership and the potential for it to be misused.
And, it's not just about outright tyranny, although that's certainly a danger. It's also about leaders who, they might have good intentions, even be genuinely pious, but they lack the wisdom or the knowledge.
Or the integrity to guide effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And that can be just as damaging.
Right. It's like this slow erosion of trust and justice that can weaken the whole society when leaders prioritize themselves over the community.
It creates a ripple effect. It's
Yeah.
like instability just spreads.
And that's where Tirmidhi brings in the idea of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
He uses a bunch of hadiths to remind us that leaders aren't above scrutiny. They answer to Allah and the community.
And it's on us, the community, to hold them accountable, to make sure they're governing with justice and integrity.
Hadith 2174 is so powerful on this. The most virtuous jihad is a just statement before a tyrannical ruler.
Wow, powerful is right. It's basically saying silence is not an option, especially when the injustice comes from those in power.
So it's a call to action, to speaking truth to power, even when it's risky.
Yeah, and it's not always about big acts of defiance. Sometimes it's just about those daily acts of holding leaders accountable, questioning things, challenging them, and demanding they're transparent.
It's about creating that culture where leaders are expected to uphold justice and integrity, checks and balances.
Absolutely. And you know what? This brings us back to that idea of good character we were talking about earlier.
hmm
It's not enough for leaders to just be competent or efficient.
Right. They have to be morally upright, too. Their character, their actions, their words, it all sets the tone for everyone.
And Hadith 2002 sums it up perfectly. Nothing is heavier on the believer's scale on the day of judgment than good character. It's for everyone, but especially for those in leadership positions.
Because their actions have such a huge impact on society, if they're dishonest or corrupt.
It's like it just breeds that environment of fitna, where
Right.
injustice flourishes and it weakens the whole society. But it's important to remember that Tirmidhi doesn't just focus on the negative stuff. He gives us examples of good leaders, too, those who embody justice, compassion, and integrity.
Oh, absolutely. Like
Yeah.
the four rightly guided caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. May Allah be pleased with them all. They were all grounded in piety, justice, and genuine concern for the community.
They show us that good leadership is possible, even with all the challenges of power and politics.
It's not some impossible dream, it's something that's been done before, and we can definitely strive for it today.
And they give us a model, a set of principles for what Islamic leadership should be. Leaders who prioritize the people, who consult with them, who are humble, God-fearing, and rule with justice and compassion.
Now, Tirmidhi doesn't shy away from making some pretty intense predictions about future trials for the Muslim community, right? Like in Hadith 22:18, where the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, talks about like societal collapse and tribulation. It can feel a little daunting when we look at the world today.
It's definitely heavy stuff, but I think it's important to remember these prophecies shouldn't be taken literally. They're warnings, reminders of what could happen if we stray from righteousness, if we neglect our responsibilities.
So it's about recognizing those patterns of behavior, both individual and societal, that can lead to decline, and then actively working to counter them.
Right, taking responsibility for where our communities are headed and making choices to steer ourselves towards a more just and harmonious future.
And that's where that idea of enjoining good and forbidding evil comes back into play. It's not enough to just focus on ourselves, on being a good person in isolation.
We have to speak out against injustice, challenge oppression, and work towards positive change in our communities and in the world as a whole.
And, that can be a tough concept. It means stepping outside our comfort zones, confronting difficult situations, maybe even risking our safety for a greater good.
You're right. It's not always easy to know when and how to speak up, especially when we're up against powerful forces or systems. It's a real dilemma that a lot of Muslims face.
And Tirmidhi seems to acknowledge this. He doesn't give us, easy answers, but he does offer some guidance through different hadiths.
Like in Hadith 2260, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, tells us how important it is to speak out against injustice, even when it's directed at someone we love or respect. It's powerful.
It really is. Our loyalty to truth and justice has to come first, even if it means confronting our loved ones or challenging those we admire.
Even when it's hard or it makes us uncomfortable, Tirmidhi is calling for us to be principled in our social activism, to be grounded in integrity, committed to the greater good, and to really believe in the eventual triumph of truth and justice.
And that message resonates so much today, maybe even more so with all the complexities and challenges we're facing now.
It's true. It's easy to get swept up in tribalism, blind to loyalty, following the crowd, even when the crowd's going in the wrong direction. But Tirmidhi's reminding us that our allegiance is ultimately to Allah and his principles.
So we have to have the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's unpopular, even when it's risky, even when it means going against the grain.
And that's where that idea of tawakkul, reliance on Allah, is so important.
Yeah.
Because facing these societal challenges, they can feel really overwhelming,
It's like David going up against Goliath. Seems impossible, but you need a lot of faith and courage.
Exactly. And just like David had faith in Allah, we need to trust that he's guiding and empowering our efforts to create positive change.
So it's about finding that balance between striving with our own efforts using everything Allah has given us and surrendering to His will, knowing that He ultimately controls the outcome.
I like that. It's about recognizing that our efforts are meaningful, that we do have a role to play, but it's all part of a bigger plan, guided by a wisdom beyond our own. And you know what? That can be comforting when facing those really big challenges.
Knowing we're not alone, that we're part of something bigger, that there's a divine purpose, even if we can't fully understand it.
Now, Tirmidhi doesn't just leave us with these big ideas. He gives practical advice, too. He recognizes these challenges need wisdom, careful thinking, and a smart approach.
Oh yeah, like in Hadith 2191, where the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, advises seeking refuge in more remote areas if things get too bad.
Right. It's a reminder that sometimes we need to protect ourselves. We're not obligated to put ourselves in danger, especially if it's beyond our control or if being there won't really make a difference.
It's about choosing our battles and knowing that sometimes stepping back is the smartest move.
It's not about giving up the fight for justice, but being strategic, saving our energy for the battles we can actually win.
And Tirmidhi also talks about seeking knowledge as protection against fitna. Knowing more allows us to see things clearly, to make informed decisions.
Exactly. We need to be able to see through deception, to make choices that align with our values. And that's where that idea of companionship comes back. Having a support system, people who share our values, makes navigating these things so much easier.
Definitely. Even the most knowledgeable, righteous person can benefit from the wisdom of others. We're not meant to do this alone. Tirmidhi reminds us the Muslim community should be a source of strength and support, especially during tough times.
We need people who can challenge us, offer different perspectives, help us see our blind spots. It's like a safety net when we stumble.
So it's about building that community of like-minded people, committed to justice and righteousness, people who will speak up and support each other.
Exactly. That community, that network, becomes this source of strength and resilience, helping us get through the tough times and come out stronger.
It's a reminder that even in the midst of all the chaos, we're not alone. There are people who share our values, who are committed to the same goals, and who will stand with us through thick and thin.
It's a beautiful vision, really. Tirmidhi paints this picture of a community united by shared values, supporting one another, and with unshakable faith in Allah's guidance. It's a vision of hope, even amidst the darkness.
A reminder that even when things seem bleak, we can still have hope, we can still strive, and we can believe in a better future.
That's a great point to end this section on. We've talked about the complexities of leadership, the warnings about societal turmoil, and the importance of seeking refuge in Allah during times of fitna.
And in our next section, our final one, we'll look at the specific ways we can seek refuge in Allah. We'll draw on the guidance we find in Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 4.
So we've talked about those external challenges, right? Like leadership and societal turmoil. But now let's turn inwards a bit. Let's focus on seeking refuge in Allah during those times of hardship. We've touched on it throughout our discussion, but how can we actually find that solace, that strength in our connection with the divine when we face those inevitable challenges?
Yeah, it feels like we've come full circle. We started with good character, then explored leadership and societal issues, and now we're back to nurturing our souls, that relationship with Allah.
It's all connected, you know. Good character helps us withstand the blows, and seeking refuge in Allah, well, that's our anchor, keeping us grounded when things get rough.
It's recognizing that even with all the preparation, with good character and a supportive community, we're still reliant on something greater than ourselves.
Exactly. Acknowledging our limitations, surrendering to Allah's infinite wisdom and mercy. It's understanding that we're not self-sufficient, you know. Our strength, our resilience, it all comes from Him. And recognizing that dependence, that's where true freedom lies.
Hadith 23:26 beautifully illustrates this. Whoever remembers Allah much, Allah will make a way out for him from every distress and will provide for him from where he did not expect.
Beautiful hadith, isn't it? It's like, when all else fails, turn to Allah.
And it's not about just giving up, right? It's not, oh, well, it's all in Allah's hands now. It's about actively engaging in remembrance, in dua, in seeking His guidance through those practices He's given us.
You got it. Allah has given us these tools, these practices to navigate the challenges. And one of the most powerful tools is prayer.
It's interesting, when you're going through something tough, you might feel like withdrawing, isolating yourself, maybe even pulling away from your religious obligations. But it seems Tirmidhi's saying that's when we need to hold on to them even tighter.
Exactly. Our connection with Allah is our lifeline, especially when feeling lost or overwhelmed. And prayer, that's the most direct link we have.
Prayer provides structure, routine, a sense of grounding when things feel chaotic. It's a reminder that even when everything else is falling apart, that relationship with Allah remains constant.
And it's not just going through the motions, is it? It's about finding solace, strength in those words and that act of prostration, that feeling of being in the presence of something greater than yourself.
It's using prayer to talk to Allah, pour your heart out, express gratitude, anxieties, everything, surrendering your burdens, knowing that He hears you, sees you, and cares for you.
Absolutely. And alongside prayer, Tirmidhi emphasizes the importance of reciting the Qur'an, especially during difficult times. It's a source of so much comfort and guidance, a reminder of Allah's mercy.
It's like a soothing balm for the soul. Those words can calm our anxieties, remind us of Allah's love and compassion.
And again, it's not just passively reading, it's engaging with the meaning, reflecting on the verses. And Tirmidhi talks about the power of specific chapters and verses for protection and solace during trial.
Like the Muawwidhatayn, right? The last two chapters of the Quran.
Exactly. Surah Al-Falaq and Surah An-Nas. They remind us to seek refuge in Allah from all kinds of evil. The internal, external, physical, spiritual, all of it.
It's important to remember, these chapters aren't magic spells or anything. They're reminders of Allah's power and protection, encouraging us to turn to Him.
Absolutely. They show our belief in the unseen, those forces of good and evil at play, and Allah's ultimate power to protect us. And, we've been talking about individual practices like prayer, reciting Qur'an, but Tirmidhi also highlights something else that's really important. Those stories of the prophets.
Right, remembering that we're not alone in our struggles. That even the most righteous people face adversity.
They faced immense challenges, betrayal, loss, persecution, but they stayed strong in their faith.
And their stories are a guide for us, showing us how to respond with patience, perseverance, and trust in Allah's plan.
Exactly. They demonstrate the resilience of the human spirit, the power of faith to overcome adversity, and ultimately the triumph of good over evil.
We've talked about individual practices, but Tirmidhi also talks about the importance of reaching out to our fellow believers during those tough times. Sometimes just having someone to talk to, someone who gets it, makes all the difference.
We talked about companionship before, but it's even more important when you're struggling, because we're not meant to bear our burdens alone. That's what the Muslim community is for, to support each other, to be there for one another.
Exactly. Tirmidhi encourages us to seek advice from those who are knowledgeable, righteous. They can offer a fresh perspective, guidance we might not see when we're in the middle of a crisis.
Right. It's about recognizing the value of community, of learning from each other's experiences, and that shared support that helps us through. And finally, Tirmidhi talks about a concept that can be tough, but ultimately freeing. Accepting Allah's decree even when it's hard.
That can be the hardest part. When something bad happens, it's natural to ask why, to feel anger, resentment.
When your world is shaken, you just want to make sense of it all. But Tirmidhi reminds us it's all part of Allah's plan. And His plan is always for our good, even if we don't see it at the time.
So it's about surrendering, trusting that even in the pain there's purpose, a lesson, a path to growth.
Yes. It's recognizing that we don't see the whole picture, that even in the darkest moments, Allah's mercy is there. And surrendering, trusting, it can be incredibly freeing.
It takes away the burden of trying to control everything. We can rest knowing that we're in Allah's care.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 4. It's been an amazing exploration of trials and tribulations, the importance of seeking refuge in Allah, and those tools we have to face challenges.
We talked about good character, leadership, those prophetic warnings about societal turmoil, and all the different ways we can seek refuge in Allah. Through prayer, remembering Him, our community, and surrendering to His will. It's been an enlightening journey. A reminder that even in the darkest times, we're not alone. Allah is with us always, and His wisdom and mercy are always there to guide us.
Thank you for being with us on this journey. We hope you found it beneficial.
And until next time, may Allah grant us strength, wisdom, and unwavering faith in the face of any trials and tribulations.